Funny Games is a film written and directed by Michael Haneke. It is a shot-for-shot remake of an Austrian film of the same name by the same filmmaker. It's a film about a family, George and Anne and their son George Jr., or Georgie. They go to their vacation home on the lake and meet Peter and Paul, two well-mannered young men who begin to hold the family hostage. The film largely serves as a commentary on violence, more specifically the way violence is portrayed in media, and why I believe Haneke wanted to make an English-language remake, for as we all know, American media is no stranger to violence. But for me, that's not what makes Funny Games such an interesting film. It's the way that the film is crafted and the way it toys with genre cliches. In case it wasn't clear, there will be spoilers for this film, so consider yourself warned. On the surface, it seems like a pretty straightforward thriller. Insert nuclear American family, complete with a boat, a nice house, and even the family dog. Then introduce two psychopaths bent on tormenting them for seemingly no apparent reason, and you've got all of the pieces of a standard thriller. But the ways the film stands out are plentiful and worth discussing. The first thing that you'll probably notice if you've seen the film is its incredibly slow pace. There are several incredibly long unbroken takes throughout, but even disregarding those scenes, the average shot is much longer than what you'd normally see in this kind of film. But every scene in the film is serving a larger purpose, which allows for quite the payoff by the end. One example would be the cell phone. We first see it in a scene with Anne feeding the dog and preparing dinner. What we don't know yet at this point in the film is that this one cell phone is their only way of communicating directly with the outside world. Never in the film do you see a landline phone, a computer, or even just another cell phone. Their one chance of calling the police or a friend is taken away in the first 15 minutes when Peter knocks the phone into the sink. It's only after the next grueling hour that we find out how significant that moment was. There are a lot of beautiful setups in the film's script with payoff moments for those who stay until the end, which is admittedly hard. It's a film that goes against the idea that a movie must be entertainment, and instead utilizes the medium to create something truly uncomfortable, at times unbearably so. Film can be a portal to reality or to fantasy, and different films have different reasons for wanting to achieve one or the other, or more frequently, a balance between the two. But Haneke made the conscious choice to make this film feel as real and tense as possible, and he uses many techniques to achieve this, one being silence. There is no original score to the film. With the exception of the opening and ending credits, there is no music set to the film as an underscore. The only time you hear music is when there's music playing in a scene, which isn't often. Music is a great tool for stirring emotions and setting tone, and in that way, the absence of music can accomplish something even greater. One of my favorite scenes that illustrates this is pretty early in the film. We see George and his son fixing up the boat, and what do we hear? Their voices, the water rocking the boat, the birds in the distance. The scene cuts, but we return a few scenes later after Peter and Paul talk with Anne. What do we hear now? The same as before, but now with the dog barking, and then silence. When the film steers into its darker scenes, your mind longs for the music cue to relieve some tension. Just when you want the underscore to rush in and for the camera to cut, there it stays, silent and unmoving. A quick cut or a backdrop of music can help distance us from what we're seeing. They're all cues to remind us that we're just watching a movie. It's not real. Funny Games doesn't give you that same luxury. It makes you wade through this dread right alongside the characters. It's why Paul breaks the fourth wall several times in the film. A fourth wall break is a tongue-in-cheek way to acknowledge that a character in a film is aware of us as an audience. Sometimes, like in Deadpool, it's used for comedic effect. In Funny Games, it just furthers its agenda of forcing you through these events in as real a way as possible. So one might think to develop this even further that you'd have to show any of the violence clear and center, right? If the purpose of this film is to involve us in as visceral of a way as possible, certainly when the violence shows up, we should experience that violence in as visceral of a way as possible. But the film does the exact opposite. Every scene of violence either happens off camera, like what happened with their dog Lucky, or is filmed in such a way that we don't really see much, a blink and you'll miss it sort of thing. Because as any student of horror knows, the best way to keep an audience scared is to make them use their imagination. Remember how Cloverfield had most people on the edge of their seat until we got a good look at the monster? How many people think the Saw movies are genuinely terrifying and not just a gore fest? Whether we like it or not, humans are natural problem solvers. We recognize patterns or a subtext, and our brains can fill in what we're not directly being given. So when a scene of violence happens off camera, our brain fills in those gaps, and what our minds conjure up is something that's unique to us, and it's why it works more effectively than a director trying to fill in that gap for you, because what scares one person might not scare another. That kind of visual ambiguity allows for more people to have the intended experience. Another way that the film stands out, certainly in the genre, is its disregard for the rules. Anyone familiar with the Scream franchise knows that there are pretty strict rules to follow in the horror genre, sometimes because they work well and other times because they've just become embedded in the genre over time as tried and true cliches. When watching a film like Funny Games, you're constantly waiting for the tables to turn to follow more of the standard procedure, and some of the most tense scenes are the ones toying with these expectations. As an audience, we think, great, the kid got out at least, only to be defeated when he runs into Paul. But of course there's no way he's in any real danger. He's a kid. Movies almost never kill the kid. But then... near the beginning, there's a scene where Paul borrows one of George's clubs to try it out, also taking one of his golf balls. Shortly after the scene with George and his son on the boat, they're all together in the house. The first blow has been struck and the games are moving along. Paul wants to play a game. He pulls out the ball and asks George what it is.
Sir? It's a golf ball.
Correct. It's a golf ball. But why do I have it in my pocket? The lady knows why. Because... well... because he didn't hit it. Correct. Because I didn't hit it. And why didn't I hit it? Because something stopped you. Correct. Because I had to test the club in another way.
Where is he?
And after all the torment and torture, all the mind games and lies, Peter and Paul seem to be leaving? They're gone, at last, and so they do the only sensible thing they can do. Anne leaves the house to try and find help while George does everything he can to get the cell phone working again to call the police. And just when we think they've gone for good...
Player 1, level 2.
we feel tricked, betrayed by our own hope. Of course they didn't leave, that's not how this would play out, but why couldn't it be? It's like Haneke is punishing us for that innocent hope, that they'll all just make it out alive. And it's what makes this next scene all the more interesting. Peter and Paul are back playing more games yet, forcing Anne to choose who between her and George will get the quick and easy gun or the slow and painful knife. She makes a play and bam, just like that, Peter's dead. And we think finally some vengeance for these people. It's about damn time. Like the last house on the left, we're ready for some payback. These people have been through so much for no reason other than to please these sadistic maniacs. Finally the tables have turned for our heroes. But that's when Haneke gives you the biggest slap in the face I've ever seen in a film. Paul literally rewinds the movie. It never happened. Maybe it's some glimpse of an alternate timeline, maybe we're meant to disregard the false reality the film proposes, maybe it is all just a movie, even to the characters. But regardless of the how or the why, it leaves us back where we were before, angry with ourselves for getting our hopes up and right back to watching these poor characters go through even more hell. At this point, there's no hope left. You know it's only a matter of time for the inevitable to happen, and we end the film roughly where we started, with Peter and Paul finding their next victims. So that's Funny Games, in a not-so-small nutshell. I think films like this are important not only because they challenge the medium, they defy the ideas that movies should be fun and give you a different perspective, but because it can offer you something you don't see much of elsewhere, unless you've been watching Game of Thrones and are used to the heroes getting killed. Films like this are almost never critical darlings, and they never will be. Too many people just don't want to watch something so hopeless and malicious, but it is a reality for some whether we turn a blind eye to it or not. Things like this and much worse happen in the real world every day, and if nothing else, it serves as a reminder to appreciate our own fragility. One might argue what the point of it all is, and I think that's it, to remind us that anything can happen at any time. One minute we might be happy heading to our nice home for vacation, and the next we might be held hostage by two psychopaths with a golf club. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.